you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
All righty. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Monica Buffalo. Constructive action items. Good morning. I want you to check that out for me. I think Mr. Fuller and I will speak about that. He doesn't know this yet, but anyway. Good morning to the entire planet, and welcome to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. We would love it if you would be a part or want to be a part of this program, and all you have to do is to call this number, 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button so that you can get in line. When you do, give the call screener your name, and we will make sure that you get on the air. If you are a first-time caller, be sure to tell the call screener that, and we have a special program set up just for you so that you can be heard. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, at gmail.com. Please, you can do that. And you can get on the chat room or in the chat room by going to blogtalkradio.com. And you want to click on where it says programs, that you want the Produce Justice show. And when you do that, then the chat room icon will come up, and you can click that, and you are in the chat room. And one of the things that you will notice when you get in the chat room is one of our listeners, an occasional caller, Constructive Action Items, gives a list of the things that we discussed on the previous show, which generally lasts a week. And you will be updated as to what's going on. And then there are relevant questions throughout the chat. And occasionally I will select one or something to be said. But listen, please, do not ask me to ask a question via the chat. That is what the telephone number is for. But now occasionally I will mention a chat, but some people take the opportunity to ask a question on the chat for me to read to Mr. Fuller on the air, and I really do not like or want to do that, don't really like to do that. But so please, ma'am, please, sir, make sure you do that. We got some very good information from the gentleman that looks over us, Mr. Fuller and I, Robert. He mentioned that the book sales have been flying off of the shelf, I believe, or something to that effect. Anyway, they've been very, very good. Yes, very good. And that is the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, this is a book by Mr. Neely Fuller, which we highly, 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 that's 3 highlies, recommend that you get to follow along. It's a code book to how to counter racism, white supremacy. So you need to do that. You can get that at producejustice.com, and there will be several references in these 2 hours or so that Mr. Fuller will make to this book, certain quotes and things. And sometimes the callers do that also, so make sure you do that. Okay, let's see what else. Let's see. No information on the Carl Nelson show. Yeah, no information on that. And if you are listening down in Texas, Ray, down in Texas, I need you to give me your or send me your email address, because I have something for you, and maybe you can address that. I think that is it. Anyway, welcome to the August the 30th, 2022 program with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. And let me introduce to some and present to others Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Mr. Fuller, first of all, good morning. Secondly, how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
Okay, you are still learning. I have two questions for you right off the bat, but I'm not going to give them to you at the moment because one of the things that is very popular that people seem to like is the thoughts and expressions that come from your mind. And what have you been thinking about in terms of thoughts and expressions that you would like to speak about before we commence with today's programming?
Well, several things. I heard other programs since last week's program about black love and as a solution to black people's problems. But I'm not going to remark on that right now because I thought of something else, too, that is kind of prevalent, I think, and that is the beating of young children, of young black children, using the technique of beatings, terrifying, in order to teach. And some people say, there's an old cliche, and they say it's biblical. Some people say, spare the rod and spoil the child. Well, the codified position is it's best, in my opinion, and this is in the code, it's best to teach by talking and explaining in detail. A lot of people have, well, shut up, you know, you're nothing but a child, don't ask so many questions. I'll just tell you, just do it because I say so. That's never a reason, according to the code. That's never a reason to tell anybody that. Do it because I say so. You always give the reason, a logical reason for everything that you say to anybody of any age. Doesn't have anything to do with age. It has to do with getting a job done in the best possible manner. And you don't so-called talk down to young people just because young people are, you might say, down, because if they're real young, they're usually shorter than you are, even if you're a short person. So I guess that's where that expression came from, talking down to people. You just talk to people. You don't talk down. You don't talk up, sideways. You just tell them the truth about anything that they ask about, and tell them in such a way that they understand what you're saying. I had teachers that terrified the students. Just a couple, not most of them. And the reason they terrified the students is because they were dissatisfied and disgruntled about something I later on observed in their own existence. They had sex problems of some type, husband problems, wife problems, whatever. Job problems with the administration, the school administration. A lot of teachers have that. So sometimes that spills over and hits the students, and it's not healthy. So one has to really be on their toes about that and explain things. If you say that something should or should not be done, explain why. Always.
Okay.
And, that's what's on my mind this morning.
Okay.
Black people get enough terrifying. Black people, period, have now exist under terrifying conditions, and always have since the beginning of the system of white supremacy, for sure. So you don't want to spread terror when you're trying to talk to somebody about how best to go about solving problems, which is what school is. School starts from the day you're born. You don't wait until you're 6 years old or 7 to start school. You start school maybe prior to when you're born. But school is always in session. Because you should always be learning something that you can use for constructive purposes in order to produce what? Constructive results. That's what your entire existence is about. So you don't do that with terror. That's not the best way. You can do it that way. That's not the best way.
That's not the best way. Okay. All righty. Let's move on here with the program. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. I received some information, Mr. Fuller, I'd like for you to address before we get into the phone calls. There's a book out, and I got the crib notes of the book and started to do some research on this, but it is called The Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodard. Have you heard of him, or have you heard of that book or that title or anything like that?
Haven't heard of that book, haven't heard of the author.
Okay, let me read this Gmail, and we can go from there. This comes from Dina. She says, hey, Mr. Bobby, how are you? I hope you and Mr. Fuller are still learning and doing well. She said, I come across a disturbing information about the white supremacists lately, something that is so disturbing that I did not want to think it was true for a long time. There is even a couple of books out about the facts that the white supremacists were cooking and eating black people. Did you or did Mr. Fuller hear or know anything about that? And you are have you heard anything about that, eating and cooking of black people, Mr. Fuller?
No.
Okay. Let me continue. She said, there is a book called The Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodard et al. There were even recipes of what parts to eat and how to prepare. Please ask Mr. Fuller also if he knows anything about this or these practices. Have you ever, in your years upon this planet, have you ever heard of things like that before?
Well, I heard of a white male, a white man named Jeffrey Dahmer, who just a few years ago was sodomizing the corpses of black males after getting them drugged up and then killing them, I think usually by strangulation while they were drugged up, and then cutting up their bodies and storing them in his refrigerator. I think the city was Milwaukee. Jeffrey Dahmer was his name, and people can probably punch it up on the computer, Jeffrey Dahmer. And every now and then he would open the refrigerator and take out portions of the bodies that he had sliced up and eat portions of the body. He was seducing mostly, quote unquote, so-called homosexual black males in bars, very quiet, very mannerable, very somewhat educated. And I understand that he got away with it for quite a while until he was finally caught. And
given a life sentence, but he didn't live out that life sentence because a black male in the prison, if I recall correctly, killed him by beating him to death. And many people may know that story or they've heard it, but that story, that was just a few years ago. So
yes, sir.
That's the only story I know of, that I can recall.
Okay.
But as a general thing, I don't know of any organizations and whatnot that make it a point of going around gathering up black people and having them for dinner.
Okay.
As food.
As food. Okay. Well, anyway, the book is called The Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodard, and I have been anyway. It's very disturbing. Very disturbing. Very disturbing. Okay. Now, the second question comes from Nawab, and he says this to you, Mr. Fuller. He says, Mr. Fuller, the inherent flaw in your argument when describing the white supremacist versus the average black person is that you tend to almost always compare the sophisticated elite white supremacist to the bottom caste Negro that gorges on ribs and links while washing it down with a 40-ounce, who then turns around and pops off his gun at anyone who bumps into him or who he thinks he is disrespecting. Ain't none of us like that in this chat or those who follow your work. So I wish you'd focus more on black people who are more like yourself, Mr. Bobby, and the rest of us here who are trying to solve the race issue and lead constructive lives. Those lowly Negroes who engage in that type of behavior are a lost cause, and they will ultimately become casualties of war. Because it comes across, especially to the newer listeners, Mr. Fuller, as if you're singing the praises of the white supremacist, as if you're deifying him as God Almighty, who we must all bow down and worship. And to that I say, hail to the no. To the no. Mr. Bobby, you may know the song I'm referring to here, but in no way in hell should we live in fear of the white supremacist who is a savage coward, thief, and has little or no original thought in his brain. That's a fact, no matter how much wealth or perceived power he has on this planet. I'll land my plate here and wait for your response, Mr. Fuller.
Oh, well, that comes under VGQ. And everybody who is listening to this program just heard what the person who wrote that said. And everything that was said should be seriously considered. Because according to the code, no one has solved the race problem. Neely Force proclaimed that his assignment is to solve it, but he hasn't done it. So therefore, anybody who has a suggestion about the best way to go about solving the race problem should be listened to. That's what Victims Guaranteed Qualification is. VGQ means everybody who is a victim of white supremacy should, and that includes gangbangers, so-called, and black people who can't stand black people. When it comes to the question of who is the authority on the race problem, no victim of the race problem, of the system of white supremacy, is an authority as far as the solutions are concerned, including Neely Fuller. Neely Fuller is just a voice in the crowd. That's all I am. And when I go to my grave, I will be a failure if I don't solve the race problem, because that's what I set out to do. I didn't set out just to talk and entertain people and go from city to city and make speeches and wave a book at them and say, read this and whatnot, and remember my name. That might be some people's objective. My objective, starting with about 1970, it wasn't always my objective, is actually, I said that I'm going to try to come up with a formula for actually solving the race problem, not just pecking around the edges of it, because I've seen enough of that. Even by 1970 or 80, I've seen enough of it, and I just kind of assigned myself. But I'm nowhere near that. So I just have a bunch of suggestions that I suggest that people listen to. Some of them people agree with. Many of them people don't. That's why I'm not on, I guess, prominent TV and all like that. I mean, my name is just skipped over on many occasions. Sometimes when I'm on the stage with other people who have what you call name recognition, I'm right there on the stage with them. But I'm not even introduced. I'm so insignificant. I've been in on occasions like that. So, but that goes with the territory. Not trying to be popular. I'm just trying to get a job done. And anybody who knows how best to get that job done should be listened to. And even people that everybody disagrees with or everybody agrees with should be listened to. All of them, football players, whoever takes a knee or whatever. That's the United Independent. That's what my book is based on. Everybody should have a voice. Nobody should be shouted down and say, ask that person out. I've actually been at seminars where I actually was making presentations. On one occasion, one black gentleman, he was older than me, he shouted from the back of the room, "You are misleading black people, and people like you should be done away with." And he practically made a speech from the back of the room. And I said to him, because a lot of the people who were sitting around saying, "Sit down, brother, don't keep interrupting and all like that. Mr. Fuller's trying to make a talk." And then some of them threatened to put him out. And I said, "No, that's not the United Independent way." I said, "Sir, come down here." And I gave him the pointer and gave him the stage. And I said, this gentleman may have the solution to the race problem. Don't ever shout anybody down or say anybody doesn't know what they're talking about and all like that. Let them present their case. And so he went to the blackboard and talked for maybe about 10 minutes until the people who were in the crowd said, "All right, brother, we heard enough." So we'd like Mr. Fuller to continue his. So, by popular vote, you might say, I got back to the stage. But I said, definitely, you don't put anybody out after they come here to listen and to learn or to teach. I mean, Neely Fuller ain't nobody. He ain't nobody's God.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to be brave, get in the white supremacist's face. Tell them to shut up. Okay? And but Neely Fuller, he's just a fellow prisoner. And he still is. That ain't changed. That ain't will ever change.
Yes, sir. Okay. All righty. Well, Nawab, Mr. Fuller addressed your question, so let's do this. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Let's go to the phone lines, and Monica, get ready. We're getting ready to go, and then we'll get the station break. Let's go to Monica. Monica, You are on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Can I ask 2 short questions, Mr. Bobby?
Yes, make them short. Go ahead.
One? Okay. My first one, Mr. Fuller, can you elaborate on why asking people how are you is not a good thing? You know, you pass people and they say, how are you doing? I hear that all day, and I try not to respond to that.
How are you doing?
Right. You know, people ask you, how are you?
Yes.
How are you doing?
According to the code, I usually, according to the code, the way I answer is the way I answered this morning. I'm still learning.
Right.
It's not a traditional way to respond. Usually people say, I'm all right. I'm up with it. You know, or they have some slang expression. But I just say what I actually do. I say, how am I? I'm still learning. I'm still a student. I'm just starting out. I haven't even scratched the surface of things that I ought to know. I ought to know millions of things that I don't know. What do I know about going to the moon? Oh, I can't even tell you much about what the moon is.
Still learning. Okay. What's your second question, Monica?
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick, Mr. Fuller, when I did that, I don't get any responses. I just thought that was interesting when I say I'm still learning. But correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say once before, like, you shouldn't ask people how you're doing? You shouldn't ask that question because, number one, if someone says, like, I'm doing terrible, I can't pay my bills, you know, how are you going to even respond to that? Did I understand that correctly? I thought I heard you say that one time. That's one of the reasons you shouldn't do that.
No, ma'am. I never said that.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that are attributed to me that I said that I never said and wouldn't say.
Okay. All right. Monica, hey, we thank you. I'm so glad Mr. Fuller's books are in the library. All right, let's break it off here. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. And if you would like to get in contact with us on today's program, all you have to do is call this number, 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button and get ready to give the call screener your name, and then you will get in rotation. You can also Gmail me at this Gmail address, the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. I will respond by saying I got it, and it will be read at a specific time. I don't know when that time is, but I will let you know the date and time as I read it. Okay, and lastly, you can get in to the chat room by going to blogtalkradio.com. And you want to go to where it says shows or programs, and then you want to get to produce just this show. Hit that bad boy, and then once you hit that, the icon for the chat room or chat box will come up. And if you would like to be a participant in the chat room, just hit that, and you are in, and make sure that you follow the chat rules. Please make sure that you do that. Okay, let's see here. All the books are in so that Mr. Fuller and I have been told, so you can do that. Get your latest book from ProduceJustice.com is the web address, and there's other information on their past shows and so forth. You can get that information on there. So please, ma'am, please, sir, you do. There's something else I am forgetting, but I'll hopefully will think of that. Okay, Monica, again, thank you. And let's see here. We're going to go to Milwaukee. And Corey, get ready. I'm going to tune you in here as soon as this thing finishes buffering. Okay, Corey, you're in. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, last week you spoke about some black people saying that love is the answer to the race problem. like love, many black people seem to think that acquiring an abundance of finances is going to somehow free us from the system of white supremacy, and that should be our sole focus, is just getting as much money as we can. Can you explain how this is not correct, and this is not going to give us freedom?
The white supremacists are the masters of money. All the money on the planet, under the jurisdiction of those white people who believe in and who practice the system of white supremacy. See, when you get control of people, you have control of money. People are money. The white supremacists understand that principle. When you can control people's minds, you are wealthy. Money is anything that a master of people calls money. Stop and think about it. The masters of people will say that, like Caligula did back in, I think I got it correctly, the Roman Empire, ancient Roman Empire days. At one time, he said that he was going to take all his wealth away from the god Neptune, the god of the sea. So he sent his army out. And the army came back with seashells, because they didn't know what to do about Neptune, the god of the sea, because, they never saw him in person. The god of the sea, Neptune, and you're an army general and you're looking for Neptune and Neptune's army. Neptune's army was the ocean. So they didn't know what to do, apparently, according to the story that I saw in the series I, Claudius. So they gathered up seashells because they didn't want to displease the emperor. You never displease Caligula about anything, or he might have your head. So they dumped all the seashells right there at his feet. And Caligula said, okay, you brought back Neptune's treasures. And so I commend you for that, my army. So Neptune will not take me on again no time soon. And the reason he made war against Neptune is because Neptune kept the rain going. He said he was sick of it raining all the time. It must be the god of the sea, Neptune. But he was the emperor, and the emperor is always right about everything. So the white supremacists have that position. We're always right. Even when we're wrong, we're right still. White, because we're white. That's why. Mm-hmm. White is right. Black is always wrong, unless we say they're right. And the only way they're going to be right is that we approve of it. That's what white supremacy means. So they have total domination over black people. So whatever money black people have, many black people seem to think that money just comes from some mysterious place from outer space. Money comes from the white supremacists. I know that for a fact. Doesn't have any other source. And the money that black people print of their own, the white supremacists have to approve of it before anybody wants it, including other black people. And that's been proven over and over again. If you travel and all like that, you'll see different types of money. But if it's any good, some white person better approve of it. Otherwise, it ain't nothing. It's just a whole lot of paper with a bunch of pretty pictures on it. Mm-hmm. That's all. Unless Neely Fuller has been misinformed. And I don't think so.
Okay. All right, Corey from Milwaukee. Thank you. Mr. Fuller, about your book. Give me a couple of minutes on your book here, or give the world a couple of minutes on your book.
Well, the things that I say, mostly are in the book, many of them, not all. Most of the basic things that I say here on the air, and a lot more. And they are mostly suggestions about what to do about, basically, problem solving. And black people's problems mostly stem, either directly or indirectly, all of them really, from the system of white supremacy, the most powerful government on the planet. So I say that government should be replaced by the government of justice. It's never been seriously tried. So I make suggestions about how the victims of racism can go about producing that thing that many people, including white supremacists, say that they want, but that nobody's ever produced. That's why my website is called ProduceJustice.com, because that's the thing that I'm trying to do. Replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. The system of justice has never been tried in recorded history. Seriously. It's been talked about, preached about, prayed about, but nobody takes it seriously. When I say nobody takes it seriously, I mean including the people who invented the term justice to describe balance or correct activities between people. So that's basically what it means. Correct, balanced, constructive activities between people. Nothing but. But I gave it a two-part definition back in 1994 because I didn't like none of the definitions for justice I saw in the dictionary, and that's in the textbook. My definitions in the word guide. It comes in 2 volumes, but basically it's one book. I'd like to crowd it. I tried to crowd it all into one volume, but it would have been very awkward to carry. So
yes,
one of these days I'll figure out, because I have on my shelf right now most of the works of Mark Twain, and it's just about the size of my 2 books, and it's just one book, and it's smaller than my 2 books. Correction. And I look at the print in it, and I don't figure out how they did that. But evidently, I mean, they did it because they did it. I'm looking at it. So maybe I can have, I'd like to have it in one volume. One problem, one book. That's one of the philosophies of the compensatory code. But you can get it by going to ProduceJustice.com. And my book is supposed to be designed to solve the race problem, not to peck around the edges of it, and to address it to the individual black person who considers himself or herself a victim of racism. If you don't consider yourself a victim of racism, if you don't think racism is the most powerful factor in your life, then you can bypass the book altogether.
Yes, sir.
And go on and do whatever you do. Because the book doesn't apply to you. I consider myself the model victim of white supremacy. And I've never been anything else. I don't have any other title than victim of white supremacy. They have completely dominated my existence on this planet, unless I have been grossly misinformed. But everything that I have, I started writing my book because of me. I started writing my book for me. I said, I can't get away from racism. I'd like to go somewhere where it doesn't exist, where nobody ever even heard of it. But I haven't talked to anybody. I travel. I've listened to teachers. I've listened to preachers. I haven't talked to anybody who says they even know of such a place or have heard of such a place. And here I am drowning in it. I got to deal with it all the time.
Yes, sir.
That's the way I perceive the world. Of course, I could be incorrect about my perceptions. But you can get the book if you consider yourself a victim on any area of activity of racism. The book may be of help to you.
Okay.
Because my book is of help to me. Because I originally, that's what I started writing it for, me. I wasn't thinking about publishing any book, but people started asking me. Said, Fuller, you ought to publish some of this, man, because I started using some of it and it works for me. And maybe it'll work for somebody else. And so, bingo, I said, well, maybe you're right.
Okay. All righty. So you can get the book by going to producejustice.com.
Producejustice.com. That's the basic 2016 edition and the original. Some people like the original 1984 edition. And the word guide shows you how to use words.
Looking at it right now.
Not to use words. What to ask questions about when other people use words. Like when they say love. So, I mean, what is love? I mean, exactly what is love? Everybody talks about love. I talked about it last week at great length.
Yes, you did.
Love. And I listened to a 2-hour program since last week, and I was waiting for the people on that program to say what the solution is to the race problem. And at the end of the program of 2 hours on TV, there was 4 people, and they all agreed the solution is love. And I just sat there because I spent last week on this program talking about the first part of it. I don't know what people mean when they say that. And I still don't.
Okay.
That is a mystery to me. What do black people say when they say the solution to the race problem is love? And everybody agrees. Everybody claps their hand and stamps their feet. Well, what does that mean? I think I think of it as an action. Love is something you do, not something that you have. But that's the codified view.
Yes, sir.
That I express in the textbook for victims of racism. But I don't know what other people mean when they say, well, all we need is love. We just need love. Love, 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 love. But I'm thinking, well, how do you apply that? Or do you apply it? Or is there anything to apply? Is there anything that you do when you love? I'm just looking for that 2-letter word, which I say is the core of everything I've written. Where's the doing part? I know all about the feeling part. Where's the doing part? I mean, the white supremacists do stuff, all right? Black people always talk about what they feel, not what they do.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Just a thought. Okay. Well, that's a good thought. That's why I use another acronym for this program, Still Learning Radio. All righty. At producejustice.com is where you can get the book and all the latest information right there at producejustice.com. Okay, let's go to Trey via Sydney, Australia. Let me see if I can get you in here. That's right, man. We are all over the planet. Okay, you are on. How you doing, Trey?
How you guys doing? Thank you so much for taking my call, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller. Thank you so much. Mr. Bobby, is it possible, and I know you always say that we should be brief, is it possible to ask 2 extremely brief questions?
If they are extremely brief, using your words, you may. Go ahead, continue.
Perfect. So, Mr. Fuller, I've heard you say before, so I'm a barber, and I live here in the concept called Sydney, Australia, and most of my clients, 90% of my clients are non-white. And I've been recommending your book to several of my clients, and I've heard you say before, while reading your book, you can just pick it up from any page and just read it. So the first question I have for you, Mr. Fuller, is in regards to if there was a new person that picked up your book for the first time, how would you recommend properly reading it?
Just that. Picking it up and just fingering through it. And then little by little, you probably start looking for specific things. I have books that I do that with. Some of my favorite books are books of quotations. And that even include parts of the Bible, Proverbs and Corinthians, because you can just pick it up and you might learn something. Every book, any book, might have a page or two or a line or two. That one line, one paragraph in some obscure book that you don't even remember the title of may affect your entire existence. You can never tell. So in answer to the question, if I was buying my book right off the shelf, that's how I would approach it. I wouldn't try to read it from front to back in one sitting. I mean, most people don't have that kind of time anyway. So I try to write the book in such a manner that you can just pick it up and turn to something specific if you're looking for something specific, if it's in there. And you go by the table of contents for that, which is kind of broad. I don't have an index in the book at all. Just didn't have pages for that. But I have a kind of a broad table of contents, so that'll.
Okay.
I even got something named, and I want to say this too, because some people probably discovered that. I got something named in the table of contents that's not even in the book. Okay, that's something that the person who typed it up overlooked, and the book went to press with that. At some future date, I got to put that material in there. It's only about maybe 6 paragraphs, but it should be in there, and it's not. And so the reader's being cheated in that regard, but I had to get the book out because at the time I thought that I was on my way to the grave. And I said, hey, I got to get it out. There's some people who say it's valuable material, so I got to get it out in some type of form. So it was a rush job. I say it's the worst written, one of the best of the worst written books ever produced on race. That's the way I describe my own book. One of the best of the worst written volumes on racism and fighting racism ever produced.
Okay. Be that as it may, what's your second question quickly there, Trey?
Yes. My second question is I'm a guy who reads as well as listens to tons of audiobooks. I've heard you speak about audiobooks in regards to, and I just want to clarify, will you ever have your book in audiobook format for your listeners and for us to listen to?
Several people have approached me on that, and that's being considered in the works. But it won't be me who will be reading it. It will be somebody else because I just don't have the time. I don't have that kind of time left. But you do have the sound of my voice on these recordings because this is my website.
Yes, sir.
So they have been quiet, and plus I have been on various radio programs, and I think I'm in their archives too, down through the years that go back to the 1970s. Mm-hmm. I've even seen, somebody showed me some cartoons, they're not authorized, that are, they say, and I thought so, very well done, of some of the things that I express in the textbook. I don't know how to tap into them on the internet, but there are some people who have seen those cartoons. Have you seen them, Mr. Bobby?
I've seen a few, but I'm mostly, I've seen a few.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Trey. Thank you from way down in Australia. What are you, 17 hours ahead or whatever? Anyway, thank you for your call. Okay, Mr. Fuller, let me read this to you. Hang on, Dollar Bill, Ray and Sam, and Produce Justice Radio. Hang on. We got you. We got you covered. Got a Gmail here, Mr. Fuller, from D. Says this. On August the 16th, 2022 broadcast, Ray from the DFW called in and sought to ask Mr. Fuller if it was off code for a group of black people to delineate from other black people, all while demanding compensation from the white supremacist government. You care to address that, Mr. Fuller?
I don't understand that question. What does that mean?
I'll tell you. Huh?
The word is delineate?
Yeah, delineate. From other black people, all the while demanding compensation from the white supremacist government.
Well, what is it that they're delineating from black people?
Okay, I'll tell you what. This is very interesting. So we have Ray from the DFW from Dallas. So Ray, get ready.
Maybe he can explain his make it more simple.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, wait a minute. Ray, let me see if I can get you in here. Okay, Ray, somebody... Yeah, go ahead, Ray. Can you explain that to Mr. Fuller? Somebody was asking a question about what you asked Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir. When I use the term delineate, I mean that to distinguish the origin of myself as a black person born in the Northwestern Hemisphere from other black people who are on the planet. So by delineate, I mean I'm born in what's called America, and I want to separate myself from a black person, say, born in the Caribbean or Africa, like that. That's what I mean when I use the term delineate.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Well, according to what I've written, the code, victims of racism are victims of racism, like prisoners of war. Doesn't make any difference where you are on the planet. If you're on the moon, you're under the system of white supremacy. You're the same as all other people who are under the system of white supremacy. That's code. That's solid code. The white supremacists dominate people based on color. So what would be my reason for doing that? For saying I'm not like the other prisoners of war. The white supremacists look at all prisoners the same. I mean, when they take prisoners, they take them. And they don't make no distinction. Just like in any war. I mean, they go to this part of the planet and that part of the planet. That's what people do when, they have an empire. They go everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But now they treat some prisoners better than others. But that's them. That's their choice. When you're a master, you can do everything. When you're the master. Master, that's what master means. That's what supreme means. Nobody second guesses me. And the dark people of this planet have proven that they are subject to the system of white supremacy. I don't know of any people classified as non-white anywhere on this planet or in this universe that I've heard of who are not subject to the system of white supremacy. And when somebody says they know of some, I want to know where they are because I want to go take a look.
Okay.
See how they pull that off.
Okay. Okay. All righty.
Mr. Bobby, that doesn't
count
against my question, does it?
Oh, yeah. I was going to get you.
Well, wait a minute. Did I fully answer the question?
Right?
Yes, sir.
My question is, why would you distinguish yourself between some black people somewhere else who are also subject to the same system you're subject to? What would be your reason?
Right?
I don't see any constructive value. Yeah, I don't see any constructive value in doing so. I realize that all black people are victims of white supremacy. I was confused as to why do I need to separate myself in terms of origin from other black people while at the same time requesting compensation from the white supremacy.
Well, we all requesting compensation. I am. That's what my book title is about. Yes. The white supremacists are the ones who did the damage. I can't charge somebody with doing the damage to me that didn't do the damage. I was born a victim of white supremacy. I wasn't born a victim of nobody else. I was born. I came into the world in prison. And the name of that prison is the system of white supremacy. It's not the American government, the African government, the Asian government, a democracy, republicanism, fascism, communism, all these different isms. I came under one system that is all of those isms put together except the ism of justiceism, called the system of white supremacy. I've never been subject to any other government, ever. And I will testify to that if I had to go before any world court in the next 10 minutes. That would be my testimony. I've been forced to lie and say that I was born under the American government. I ain't never been under the American government. I would love to be under the American government, or the African government, or the Asian government, because these are governments that don't exist. The government that does exist is the only one that I've ever known. It's called the system of white supremacy. That's the only government on the planet Earth here in the year 2022. There is absolutely no other government, period, than the system of white supremacy. Now, that statement that Neely Fuller just made to the entire world is either true or false. He's either telling the truth or he's lying.
Okay. Ray, hang on. Hang on, Ray, because I have to close out this hour. Hang on, Mr. Fuller. Hang on, Ray, because I'm going to get your question here. Okay, for those of you who have to go, we have basically come to the end of the first hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Neely Fuller, Jr. So we got to cue that music up. So what we're going to do is we're going to close down this. So we want to say thank you for listening, and hopefully you will be back next week with more questions or just to listen to the program. Now, for those who have to stay, you please stay. We got Ray on his question. Dollar Bill with the holla. Sam in Colorado. Justice Radio is going to be on from Colorado. And more about Mr. Fuller's book and more of your questions. By the way, new callers, if you call in, we've got a special thing for you. But we'll talk about that on the other side. You have been listening to the first hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Stay tuned for the second hour, which will commence in 7 seconds. All right. Welcome to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. We're about 30 seconds ahead of the Eastern Standard Daylight Savings Time, but nevertheless, here we are. Welcome to today's second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. If you have any questions that you would like to answer, be a participant, or just listen to the program, you can call this number, 516-453-9921. You have a question, just push the number 1 button, and you will get in line And when you get recognized, when you get in line, make sure you get a call screen or your name, and then eventually I will recognize you and have Mr. Fuller address your questions or concern. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And it won't be read today, but I will tell you that I got it, and it will be read at a specific time and date. And you can also join the chat room. You can do that by going to blogtalkradio.com, and you want to go where it says programs, and you want to hit that, and you'll come up with the Produce Justice Show. Hit that bad boy, and the chat room becomes available, and you can get in that chat room and find out what's going on. Join the chat. Have your opinion on that. Make sure that you stay codified following all of the chat rooms. Okay. Or rules, yeah. Okay. All the books are in. As a matter of fact, Mr. Fuller and I, were told this morning that the sales of those books has really, really picked up and really been good. So keep on and keep on talking and keep on telling people, about this. And the more and more people are tuned in to the program, I have statistics of the people around the planet that this program reaches, and also at least the 10 major cities in this concept in the Northwest Hemisphere that are listening to the program predominantly. So that's good. That's real good. It's all good. Even when it's not good, it's still good. Okay. And if you have noticed the feature that I believe Robert or somebody has introduced, maybe Moonpie or maybe Sharon had her suggestion in there, but when we come near the end of the program, they will inform me that this is the last call, and when a caller, and when that comes up and I see it, then no more calls after that point right there. So just keep that in mind. And I'm sure that Mr. Fuller, I probably could not speak for him, but I am appreciative of that, so that it gives me more direction as to where we are going. Okay. So thank you. Okay, Ray. Man, I almost deleted you. Back to the call. Ray, go ahead. From Dallas, go ahead, Ray, with your question.
Mr. Bobby, could you please leave me on the line, sir? And may I please ask 2 concise questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, is destroying ever constructive?
Is what?
Destroying.
Destroying?
Yes. Can destroying ever be constructive?
Sure.
Okay.
You destroy things
Mr.
all the time. You destroy, you put logs on a fire, you're destroying the logs, or transferring them, if you want to use that term, because the scientists say that all matter never dies. It's just transferred into something else. So when you burn up a few logs in the fireplace or around a campfire, the logs turn to ashes, and the ashes go back to the soil, and the soil regenerates. Sometimes ashes are used to help to grow crops. So that energy never dies. It's just transferred. Could be the same way with people's bodies. And some people of different religions say the same thing happens with people's souls. The soul leaves the body. They say something called a soul. It doesn't just die. It just transfers to some other realm. Many religious scholars say that that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
So scientists say that matter, meaning something you can touch and feel, is never destroyed. It just changes its form. Clouds are formed, then they dissipate, but they don't disappear. They reform someplace else. And that's these things are observable.
Okay. What's your second question, Ray?
Yes, Mr. Fuller, if the Creator encounters a force which inhibits the ability to create, is it correct for the Creator to become a destroyer until that force is effectively countered?
Oh, the Creator is what we call God, or Allah, by different names, Jehovah, the Master, the Great One. The Creator creates. People don't create anything. We shape things that are already here. No such thing as a person saying, people will say that, this is my creation. That's not true. Because whatever you're showing to somebody, the materials that you made it out of was already here. To create means to make something out of nothing. And nobody can do that but a creator. So I believe that there is a creator. Making something out of nothing. And first of all, the Creator had to make the nothing for the something to appear as something that came from nothing, but the nothing had to be made before the something could be made out of nothing. And does anybody know how to create nothing? How about creating space? We use space, but do you know what kind of mind that it takes to create space? I mean, where there is no space. Can you even imagine what it's like where there's no such thing as space until it is created? Space has to be created. But the average person's mind, I don't think, I know mine can't go that far. I don't even know how to, I wouldn't even know how to start. To say, what would it be like that where there is no space, and then I Neely Fuller, I'm going to create space. And then I'm going to put things into that space that I created. But to create space, think of this. You're in a rocket ship. You pass all the planets until there's nothing left to pass, and you're just in what they call outer space. All right? You've heard of inner space and outer space. And these are cliche terms that I don't truly understand. But the people who created these terms, produce these terms, rather, know what they mean. But suppose you're in this rocket ship and you pass all the planets and all of the black holes and everything that there is to pass, and you finally reach what they call the edge of space, and then you cross that line into what? I've asked myself that question. Traveling in a rocket ship, you pass everything, all the stars, all the planets, all the black holes that they say out there, all the galaxies. And finally, you reach a spot where you are now going to surpass space. You're no longer going to be in space. You've reached the outer limits of space. What would that look like?
That's a good question.
You're looking from the rocket ship window now, and you're looking at, you say, we just left space behind 15 minutes ago. So what are you looking at now out the window?
I don't know. Sound like to me you'd be spaced out. I don't know.
There you go. That's an excellent term you just said. You just coined it. Spaced out.
All right. Ray, thank you, and I'm going to keep you on the line. Okay, everybody on the planet, we're getting ready to go to New York. And you know who's in there with the holler. And that be the Dollar, straight out of Flatbush. Go ahead, Dollar.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. How's everybody doing?
Yes,
all right,
sir.
You can hear me well? You can hear me well?
Sir.
I'm going to jump right in it. Now, if you, Mr. Fuller, y'all been talking about a lot of stuff this morning, and it is really funny to me, some of the stuff that has come out, but it's really good talk. I want to say that. I want to say blessings to everyone. But I'm going to say this in reference to the space thing. If y'all had some real money, then you would know what is beyond space, because then you could build you a rocket ship and get up out of here and find out. So I'm going to say this to you before I get busy. I'm going to say my solutions to defeat the system of racism and white supremacy. It's my VGQ. It is for find something that is wrong, boycott it. That's one thing. And the next thing is get those reparations. In fact, the Caribbean nations reparations group has called for European governments to pay $50 billion as a starting point for the 200 years of free labor. This was in the New York Times just the other day. And in this system of white supremacy, money or whatever they use to pay your rent, to buy your clothes, to get your food, whatever they call it, it is necessary, in my opinion, to get as much as you can to defeat the system and to live a better life. Last thing. In the Shawshank Prisoners, the closest, I forgot his name, the character who escaped, in that movie, he became close with the warden. He became friend of the wardens and the prisoners, and that's how he escaped. So that was like money, gaining more money. Because when you have money and capital or whatever it is that they call it that you need to survive in this system, you can live a better life and be able to get ahead. Here I'm going to say this. In your book on the economics, in the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and action for victims of racism, I want to know, this is my question, how can non-white people, and Miss Bobby, I need you to keep me on the line.
Okay.
How can non-white people defeat the system of white supremacy when they have limited resources, according to your book, that's what you said, limited time, according to the book, limited wealth, according to the book, limited power, education, security, material care for offspring, and limited understanding of codification? How can they defeat this system, Mr. Fuller? Thank you.
Okay.
Trial and error. Like you do anything. Like you defeat ignorance. Trial and error. Going into outer space is all about trial and error. Coming up with the first prototype of an airplane, putting wings on a bicycle. It didn't work. You're pedaling and pedaling and pedaling and huffing and puffing and whatnot. You're not going nowhere. Then you finally get something called a motor and put that on those wings, and it crashes. People died. But trial and error. Now, as you try something, like a baby trying to walk, the baby tries to walk, but the baby makes errors in trying to walk. The baby falls down and lets out a yell or two, or three, or four, or 200. But then the baby pulls itself up by learning, maybe if I hold on to something, I can pull myself up on my feet, and I can stay on my feet as long as I'm holding something. And then the baby holds on to something, and then the baby takes one step away from what it is holding on to. And then the baby falls down again on its bottom That's usually the way it goes. But then the baby gets up again. Trial and error. Next thing you know, the baby is toddling across the room, holding on to something every now and then, falling every now and then, getting up every now and then. Trial and error. It's the same way with organisms of any kind, creatures of any kind. Trial and error, whether it's elephants or alligators and whatnot. The alligator tries to get food as a baby alligator. Fails. Tries again. Fails. Tries again. Neely Fuller's book is about leapfrogging a bunch of trial and errors, and at the same time using trial and error, because the procedure applies to everything and to everybody and to every creature on what we call planet Earth. It's always been. I don't say it always will be because I don't know the future that well. But I know the past well enough to know that trial and error, you keep doing things. When it doesn't work, you try something else. Now, that's something black people have to learn. Stop talking about tradition. Well, this is the way we always done it. That's why you keep failing, too.
Yeah.
Our ancestors did it. Your ancestors were put in chains. Stop and think about that, folks. Your ancestors, with all of their so-called brilliance, were put in chains, every last one of them, everywhere the white supremacists went. They all wound up under the foot of the white supremacists. So you don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, as Einstein said. He knew a little something. Albert Einstein.
Robert.
He said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If you keep doing something that fails, you're going to get the same result. You're going to fail again. So you do something different, folks. Neely Fuller's book is different. If you read it, you'll see even the words are different. Definitions are different. And everybody who's writing a book now should think about writing not books that have already been written. That's already been done. Everybody who sits down to think about or write about anything now should think about everything that was done before that failed, and then try, like everything, not to do that again.
Okay.
Carjacking as a career. You can make a career out of carjacking. How many cars do you have to jack before you jack your last one and say you're rich? These black people talking about our traditions. Look at our traditions and what they got us so far. I'm not supposed to be preaching. That's against the code.
Okay.
I'm just supposed to be talking.
All
right. Lower your voice for. Stop talking like you're preaching, because you don't know enough to preach. Neely Fuller. This is Neely Fuller talking to Neely Fuller now. Neely Fuller, code is not supposed to be preached. Preachers preach. Code is supposed to be told. Cause and effect. That's all. You just tell it. Tell the truth about everything if you're going to talk at all. You don't want to tell the truth, just shut up. Neely Fuller, that applies to you too. And don't say nothing to nobody that's not true. That's code.
That's what we get here on Still Learning Radio.
They thrive on that. Lying. They're experts. You can't beat them at doing that. Don't think you can. whole lot of homeboys sitting in what they call the hole-in room right now, trying to make up stuff off the top of their head. They should have thought about that before they got that hole-in room. Because, see, the white supremacists know how to lie, and they know when you're lying. They're experts when it comes to lying. We don't know nothing about lying.
Okay, that's what we learn here at Still Learning Radio. From the chat room for Daryl and Ray, and for you, Mr. Fuller, Constructive Action Items wrote this. This is from the chat. I think the confusion is not so much the delineation, but the amount of help that each individual black person needs, but is not getting. If a black person in a specific location needs a specific type of constructive help, and they don't get it because the white supremacists want to showcase another black person, that is the cause of the conflict between black people. This is shadow boxing. All black people need to be compensated correctly. The system of justice will do that. All black people should ask the white supremacist for the constructive help they need and compensate for what's missing. All righty, Constructive Actions Items.
That's out of the code book.
Okay.
That's right out of the code book.
Okay. All right. JusticeRadio.com, Colorado. It is your turn, and then we'll go to Sam. Yes.
Greetings. Greetings, all. This is JusticeRadioStation.com, based on the compensatory code concept, a formula, the formula, antidote. There are two major problems among people of the known universe. The second major problem, I'm going somewhere with this, Mr. Fuller. I have a question. Problem keeps most people consumed, talking with confidence and little or no clarity as one continues identifying with the fake, false, phony, psychological, mental, race classification tool that makes everyone a racist. The only scientific functioning racist is white supremacy. Not all white people. For the individual to produce justice, one must use words in a manner that reveals truth. In detail, JusticeRadioStation.com recognize and resolve the two major problems among people. Will you remind everyone two major problems are, Mr. Fuller? Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Fuller.
I remember writing that, but I don't remember what they were.
Okay, I'll give you something to research then next week. Then.
It's in the code book.
Uh-huh. All right. Thank you, JusticeRadio.com in Colorado. Thank you. Hopefully Mr. Fuller can find that, or maybe I can look that up.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's why I wrote and started writing the code book. I mean, I was writing it for myself. But even when I first started writing it, my memory was much sharper when I was 26 years old than it is now at age 92. But even then, I would have to look in my hip pocket and look at those raggedy pages and try to find something that I wrote in order to handle the problem that I had. Because that's what I was doing.
Okay.
When I first started writing the first few pages of the compensatory code, I had to actually reference because I would have forgotten what I wrote. I said, I got this problem coming up today, and I don't know how to handle it. But I wrote something on it. So I had maybe about 15 pages and in a little ragged notebook that I carried in my hip pocket, and I would take it out and say, "Oh, here it is, here it is." Okay, so when I go to the meeting today, I'll know what to say.
Yes.
All right, and I would read it to myself, and and sometimes at the meeting I would forget what to say, and I'd just pull out the notebook. And I got to the place I would do that on the job later on here in Washington, D.C. And sometimes the director of the building who would be at the meeting, he'd say, "Well, I see Fuller's taking out his notes again."
The old raggedy notebook. Okay.
Yep.
All righty, let's do this. Sam, Colorado, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, everybody. So my question is, Mr. Fuller, if a white person says that they openly says they're going to go against white supremacy and do everything in their power to combat white supremacy, and in turn they get killed by white supremacists, like, they admit in court, "I am a white supremacist, I'm killing this white person because they're trying to go against our system," does that not make that white person that was killed a victim of white supremacy?
No.
I like to stay on the line.
That's a white person. That's a white person in the system of white supremacy who is trying to eliminate the system of white supremacy. That's what that is. See, it's very difficult for a white person who is able to be a racist to not be a racist in the system of racism. In fact, according to logic, it's impossible. If they're able to be a racist, it's like being born. You're born in Germany in 1936, and you're in the German army. Now, you may not want to be in the German army, but you're in the German army, and you're wearing the uniform. And you say, "Well, I hate this. I don't even like Hitler. I don't like swastikas. I don't like this uniform." But you're in the German army. That's where white people are stuck. That's why I say it's not an emotional thing. It's business. And so the code says that if a white person is able to be one, that white person should always be suspected of being one. The key term here is able. Now, this is code, counter-racist code. That doesn't change as long as white supremacy exists. Now, I don't talk to white people for the most part about how to solve the race problem, because the assumption is they already know. I can't tell them anything. I'm a prisoner of war. The people who run the prison know how to run the prison. So every white person knows more about racism than I ever will, even when they think they don't. It's because they were born in a system of racism where you learn things not by people sitting down and teaching you, "Now, this is how you be a racist." No, everything that you're doing as a white person in the system of white supremacy is supportive of white supremacy. Otherwise, there'd be no such thing as white supremacy. So it's not personal. Now, black people got to look at it like that, too. It's not personal. It's business. White supremacy is a business, the biggest, most efficient business that the world has ever seen when it comes to handling things. Nothing has compared with it. It's the most progressive system ever thought up when it comes to handling things. But when it comes to interacting with people, it's the worst system ever thought up in the minds of people, because it destroys millions of people and worships things and teaches even the victims of white supremacy not to value people, but to value things.
Value things, okay.
Stop and think about it. Black people put more value on things. That's why they will kill you for a pair of sneakers.
Sure will.
Or for your second-hand car. They will kill you. You are nothing. But the car is everything.
Things. Ooh.
Where did we learn that? From the usual suspects, the white supremacists. Because they value things more than they value people.
Things, yeah. I'm going to write a book about that. Things. Thank you, Sam, Colorado. By the way, Dollar Bill, this is for you in the holla. And maybe you know about this gentleman too, Mr. Fuller. The billionaire Robert Smith. Have you ever heard of him, Mr. Fuller?
I've heard of him.
Yes,
but,
the Vista.
But I can't even picture in my mind. I don't even know whether he's white or non-white.
No, he's brother. He's brother. Vista,
he's black.
Yeah, he's black brother. Yeah, black brother.
He's black.
Owner of the Vista Equity Partners. They trade with the big boys. Dollar Bill, if you investigate this man, you'll find out that this is where the big boys play. In the offshore action, okay, I'm referring to in code the Pandora Papers. You ever heard of them? Check it out. All right, for everybody else, station break time. You have been listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And we thank you for listening to the program. Now, for those who want to get in contact with the show in the last half hour or so, all you have to do is call 516-453-9921. Make sure that you press the number 1 button if you have a question, and we'll try to make sure that you get on. You can also reach me by going to the chat room. All you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com. You want to get on to where it says shows or programs, the Produce Justice Show. Click that bad boy, and then the chat room will come up and do that. And you can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. That is the way that you get into the program. For new callers, when you call that number, just tell them that you are a first-time caller, and you'll get the first-time caller alert. And don't be scared. Just ask your question, and you'll get on. We got a special program for you. And for those of you who are listening, I don't know if Robert was a part of this, Sharon, or Moon Pie, who I haven't heard for a long time. But they give me a little information that says the last caller. So when you hear that, ding, 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 last caller, you know that the show is have reached the point where we are going to land this bad boy. I have a thing for planes. I really do, in airports. Okay, anyway, there you go. But Dollar Bill, Robert Smith, Vista Equity Partners, those are the big boys. Offshore accounts, if you know what I'm talking about. The Pandora Papers, check it out. Okay. Got to get this brother in here from Oklahoma. Come on, Dre. Get ready, Dre. Get ready. All right, Dre, you are there. Do it.
Yo, good morning, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bobby.
Good morning, Dre.
My question is, Mr. Fuller, hello, my name is Dre. I called last week, and I asked where black people were spinning our wheels with how we approached fighting racism. I believe it can be defeated, but our approach seems to be ineffective. We do things like getting lawyers, protesting, so-called creating generational wealth. Are those strategies a waste of time? Because the white supremacists, they're in charge of making the laws. They control the laws. They control the money. So are we wasting our time trying to fight the system, using the system? Because history shows that so far these things have failed. Like you said earlier, we continue to do things that failed. And, you know, black people, we've been sabotaged using these tactics. So are we spinning our wheels? Are we wasting our time, you know, using these strategies as a way to defeat racism?
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
We're wasting our time when we do things that don't work. racism is simple, basically. And counter-racism is simple. It's just that you do something, you try something. Yeah, you try a number of things, and the suggestions are in the code book itself. And when they don't work, you say, well, that doesn't work. I'm going to modify this thing and see if I can go back, just like a baseball player or anything. They say, a football player. Well, that didn't quite work, but maybe if I modify the same play, just to tweak it a little bit, it will work. So you tweak it a little bit and tweak it a little bit, and it might work. You make a breakthrough. Say, oh, I see where I was making my error. Coaches understand that. Black people understand that on a football field. The minute we leave that football field, we don't understand nothing at all. And that's been proven. See, so we got to carry, I just thought I'd throw that in there. A whole lot of us who are sports fans or people who are participating in sports. You understand codification when you're playing football because you're interested in football. So you'll codify that. You're a basketball player, you want to be in, a top player in basketball, baseball, in answer to your question, yeah. But see, you do things and you say, hey, I ain't doing that no more. I am not going to try to make that shot from that part of the field, that part of the court. I am not going to do that. Because that other player, he always, he makes sure that I lose the ball every time I do that. So, hey, I did that the last game with another team, and I had another opponent who was always watching me, and knew my technique and all like that. But I knew his technique, and I defeated him, and that's why we won the game. But we losing this game. I don't know what this guy's doing. This guy's codified, to counter every act that I make. He's baffling me altogether. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to change my technique right here in the middle of the game. I'm going to talk to when I get on the bench, I'm going to talk to somebody about this. I'm going to say, hey, I can't do that with him, we understand that when it comes to sports. We understand everything about that. The minute we walk off that basketball court or football field, we get right back into the swim of how everything else we've been doing has been done by our uncles and all like that before us that has failed. But we say it's a black thing. You wouldn't understand. You ain't supposed to understand something that don't make sense. All it is making sense, folks. Stop and think, if you're doing something, does this make sense? Is this going to produce, like I try to say on every program, a constructive result, guaranteed? This thing I'm fixing to do, or this thing that I'm listening to somebody say in the barber shop or wherever, that now if you do this and you do that, listen to those two words. Everything I'm listening to, is it going to produce a constructive result? Because that's all. Every black person who has a mind should, from this moment on, think of nothing but constructive results. I don't care if they're listening to Neely Fuller make a speech and all like that. This thing that Neely Fuller is talking about, is it going to produce a constructive result? Okay. If I read his book, is it going to produce a constructive result, yes or no? All right. That's all you should want to know about anybody or anything that you encounter.
Okay. Before I move to the next question, what you just said right there makes me ask you this question, which you spoke briefly about 2 weeks ago. In order to get constructive results, do we need, now this was your word right here, constructive contacts?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Nothing but constructive contacts. Don't be in touch with nothing that's not going to produce a constructive result. And that includes people creatures and things.
Got it.
Don't even touch a squirrel unless they're going to produce a constructive result. And you are able to say what the constructive result is.
Yes, sir.
You say, I'm petting this squirrel because it makes me feel good. You know? And when I feel good, I think about doing constructive things. Now, that's a constructive result.
Yes,
if
sir.
the squirrel bites you, that may not be counted as a constructive result.
I don't think it'd be too cool now. Okay. This is from Ross Amin. Says this. As prisoners of war, we as black people need finances to survive and hopefully gain some comfort. There are black billionaires on this planet, yet they are still prisoners to the system of white supremacy. On page 408 of the Compensatory Counter-Racist Code Book, you gave a compensatory quote which says, quote, the only thing that you can truthfully say is yours is whatever you have that no other person can take, end of quote. Mr. Fuller, can you please explain what we as black people can truthfully say is ours?
Nothing. The prisoners of war. Keep thinking about that. Prisoners of war in capital letters. Prisoners of war don't own anything and cannot own anything in the system of white supremacy, which is a prison system for all of the people of color on the planet. So you don't own anything. Because of what? Where's the logic? Everything in codification is based on logic, not on emotion, but on logic, mathematics. If someone owns you, what do you own? That's the question. You don't own anything. Whatever owns you owns everything that you got. Well, I got a wife you think you have. Keep on thinking that. If you want to think in error, you ain't got no wife. You're a prisoner of war. Prisoners of war don't have wives or husbands or children. They belong to the prison master. That's right in your face. That statement is either true or false.
Okay.
Or those series of statements. And ain't nothing in the code that's supposed to be false. Nothing.
Okay.
If it's false, it ain't code.
Okay.
Right.
Let's do this as we wind down the time here. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. We got a few minutes here. Let's go to Darnell quickly. Darnell, New York, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What's your question? Darnell?
Hello. Good morning.
Yeah, what's your question? Hey, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to BGQ for today.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's out of the code book. It's in the quotations part. One only fears what one cannot control.
What page is that?
It's in the quotations. I don't know exactly what page, but it's one of the quotations in the back of the book.
And it says what?
One only fears what one cannot control.
My hearing is bad, and my
it's in the
comprehension
quotations.
is worse.
Yeah. We'll find it in the quotations. Okay. Thank you, Darnell from New York. Thank you very much, my brother. Okay, John in Houston. Let's see if I can get you in here, because we're going to have to wrap this bad boy up. Go ahead, John.
Grand Risings, gentlemen. It's a good day to you, Mr. Bobby, and to Mr. Fuller. I wanted to just quickly respond to only one, and I don't necessarily say it's a flaw, but the argument that the brother raised about delineating ourselves from other, as the elder calls, prisoners of war, or who are incorrectly described as black people. When I heard him say that the real reason reason of justice would be to have no one be mistreated, and those who are mistreated the worst get the most treatment. That would be the first way of my delineating why we are unique from any other melanated people on the planet. And it's not just because we are born here in the construct called North America. There's a reason why the white supremacists have set up shop here, and we actually suffer the most of the onslaught of white supremacy. Now, you may not agree with my perspective on that, Elder, but I would suggest there is a reason why there is immigration only to North America, no place else on the planet, not on the moon, or not in the universe. And the reason that everyone else is coming here is because we're suffering the most mistreatment. Now, I'll finalize with this, whether we consider it a BGQ or whether you want to respond to what I'm suggesting in responding to your statement to the other gentleman. Hitler's Germany and the Praetorian Guard of South Africa both studied the white supremacist system of North America, and particularly the antebellum South, where we have been convinced to believe that we are products of chattel slavery. Now, in any fashion of where you go to see where white supremacy is implemented worldwide, Mr. Bobby, I argue, they start first and foremost here. And we were the first victims of perfecting what is the worldwide system of white supremacy. And I'd like to hold on to listen, whether you respond to that, Elder Fuller, or not. I still would argue that we are unique for a particular reason, and no one else has suffered as our people have suffered. And
all right. Thank you, John. Thank you very much, John. And I will keep you on. Mr. Fuller, do you care to respond to what John has said?
Well, I was talking about, the code book is designed for solutions. So there are people who are being born now, even in the Northwestern Hemisphere, who will not have gone through what Harriet Tubman went through. Some black people have become billionaires here in the Northwestern Hemisphere, and some black people in other parts of the world have become billionaires. And they will, many of them will say, I didn't have no problems at all. I don't know what you all are talking about. I mean, you don't have no get up and go. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, I breeze right through it. And that, people will say that, but even they are being included. I'm talking about black billionaires, which we have right here in 2022.
Robert Smith.
or a number. I mean, a number of sports people and whatnot. I mean, have millions and millions of dollars. Actors and actresses and people that write songs. I mean, are doing what you call comfortable money. They have plenty of it. And they'll tell you that, I had some struggles and whatnot, but I mean, I don't know what's wrong with the rest of these people, but y'all better get with it or something, whatever it is, because I got plenty of money. All right? And a lot of black people will say that right here today in 2022, who are in the Northwestern Hemisphere and in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, so-called South America, in Brazil. You will find some black people who will say, I don't know what's wrong with the rest of them. I'm doing well. All right? I don't see what they're belly aching about. But even they are being included according to the code. Why? We're talking about justice. Justice just means this. That's why I'm saying everything works out fine, perfectly, really. Perfectly. Justice has to be. It means, what is the definition of justice? That's why I say replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. So what is justice? I mean, you have to know what it is if you say that it's going to replace something else. It's going to be better. So what is it? It's guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most in any setting, if it's just two people in a room, one of those people needs more help than the others in some area of activity, most likely. So you work on whatever that help is. It's just two people in a room. The principle is the same, whether you're talking about 2 people or 2 trillion people. Doesn't matter. Help the person right then who needs help the most, and guarantee that in the process, no one is mistreated.
No one is mistreated.
Now,
okay.
That's a balancing act, but that's what we need. Balance between people.
Okay. Let's see here. We got just a few minutes to go. Adam in British Columbia and Marcus, if we do not get to your question or comment, listen, a way has been created that if we don't get to you, if you call in next week, that they will expedite you to the front of the line. That's if we don't get to your question, okay? Right now, new caller alert. We got to be on our word. And wait a minute, see if I can get it up on the screen. Here it is. Wait a minute, make sure. Yeah, new caller alert. It is going to be Sherry from Vancouver. Wow, the BC Lion Country. Go ahead, Sherry. You're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And it's an honor to meet you, Mr. Fuller. My question, sir, is how does racism become systemic even though discrimination is illegal?
How does racism become systemic even though what?
Discrimination is illegal, sir?
Well, the white supremacists just decided that they're going to have a system of white supremacy, a system of government. The formula is very simple. They say, let's try to put everything that we do on the basis of the color of a person's skin. What about that? Now, I'm just imagining how it got started because I wasn't there. I imagine it started maybe with just 1 or 2 people, like most things. Start with 1 or 2 people, and then the 1 or 2 people become 15, and then 30, and then 30 million, and then on and on and on. But I imagine the conversation sort of went like that. Well, we have tried this type of government, and we've tried that. We've had, emperors and whatnot. We have had all kind of kings all over the place. Why not try doing the world's business on the basis of the color of the skin? And the first person who said that, probably to another person, presumably white, say the color of a person's skin. You think that will work? Well, what do you mean by that? Well, you classify people who have dark skin as people who are supposed to be slaves to those who have light or white skin. Why not do all the world's business on that basis? You think we ought to try that? And so they probably thought about it and said, well, I'll kick that idea around and see what a third person says and So they came up with the idea. It had to start that way, like everything starts. Start small. And so they tried it. And the next thing you know, it spread like wildfire, faster than any other idea of government ever was spread, and with greater efficiency. That took off like a rocket and spread in no time. Other types of government took a long time, drudgingly, setbacks and all that type of thing, disagreements about how to go about doing it. That was so clear and simple, and this is how I imagine it became so powerful so quick, in such a way that the people who became subject to it, it hit them so hard and so fast, they didn't even know what was going on. Because most of the world was divided into what? Tribes. And still is. We're still trying to hold on to it. And the white supremacists laugh at all of them. All you tribal people. We are the greatest tribe. The system of white supremacy.
Okay.
That's how I imagine it.
Okay. All righty. From British Columbia, Sherry, do not be a stranger. You can call in anytime. We'd love to have you, but thanks for calling. Okay, Mr. Fuller, we got about 3 minutes here, so I'm going to give you those 3 minutes to talk about your book.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, for those that are on the line, we don't have enough time here, so remember Marcus and what is it, Sam? Marcus and Sam, I believe it was. Marcus and Darnell. Anyway, you can call in next week, and they'll make sure that you get expedited to the front of the line so that your call, so you can ask your question. So thank you for that. Mr. Fuller, go ahead. 3 minutes on your book there, please, sir.
In the meantime, get the book if you don't have one. I know it's a steep price on that, and I know the price of gasoline and all like that. I got to take that into consideration and all that. But I would like to get the book down where, hey, it's a breeze to pay for this book. These books got a stiff price on them, all three of them, the old ones and the new ones, the two new ones. But go to producejustice.com, because I'm trying to write a book that will solve the race problem. That's what I tried to do. Now, not a book that's not designed to peck at it or to entertain yourself with it. You can do that too. But to try to actually solve your problems as an individual person each and every day, dealing with this thing called the system of white supremacy. Because the theory is solve the problems of the individual person and you solve the problems of all people. And that's what this book is supposed to help you do. Go to producejustice.com.
All righty. Producejustice.com. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, all of the callers, all of the chatters. Thank you for the emails. You've been a great audience today. Tremendous questions, and we do thank you very, very much. Well, we've just about come to the end of the program. Got about a little over a minute. So we appreciate your questions and giving Mr. Fuller an opportunity to address your questions or concerns. Hope that you learned something today. I know I did. I know I did. Yes, indeed. But check out the information to see if it's true or not true, if it applies to you, if not it applies to you. Check it out and see. That's the only way you're going to do that. But just remember that we are all still learning. Mistakes and all, we are all still learning. So in that place, that is good also. Okay, Mr. Fuller, we got about 45 seconds, and you got it. I'm going to give that to you before we wrap this bad boy up.
If you try anything that's in the book and it doesn't work, if you can get on air and let me know it, I want to know it, because it ain't supposed to be nothing in this book that doesn't work for you if you use it. Nothing.
Okay.
That's the only way it becomes code. Code means something works.
Something works. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. We made a lot of mistakes today, but guess what? We are still learning and trying to get better. So we hopefully will be better next week. You guys have a good week. Stay on code. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. Thank you, Robert Sharon, Moon Pie, and all. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Thanks, everybody.